Welcome everybody to the Visual Content Marketing Show. I'm your host Krishna Day, and the Visual Content Marketing Show explores how to integrate visual content into your digital marketing and communications plans, including exploring trends, technologies, and practical tips. So I'm delighted that you're able to be with me for this episode of the show. And I really invite you to leave your comments here if you're watching here as the event is live on Google Plus or on YouTube. Then please leave your comments and we will come back and look to cover as many as we can as possible. In terms of today's show, I'm thrilled to be joined by Kath Dawson, and I've got to know Kath over the last number of months where we've been collaborating, and she's been hosting a hangout with a colleague of hers in terms of called the Great British Hangout, and trying to encourage people to use Hangouts just as I've been doing here from Ireland. And I was really excited when Kath, through her organisation, which is Strategy Internet Marketing, and they're based in the UK, started to explore the use of a new tool that was made available. And you might have seen an announcement of this back in April of 2014. And that is the fact that whilst large organizations had been experimenting with a new tool from Google called Google Plus Post Ads, really enabling us to be able to take the content from Google Plus into other platforms for people to be able to see that content through the display network. And I was getting some really good results for large organizations. It hadn't been available to those of us to be able to do it as a self-serve unit. However, Kath and her team were so excited by this that they decided to experiment with it. And me being me, I said, okay, Kath, would you come on and would you be prepared to share your experience with us? So, Kath, I'm going to pass it over to you to say thank you for joining us, but tell us a little bit about yourself, your organization, and then we're going to get into a bit of a deep dive about what Plus Post Ads are and how you've been using them.
Thanks, Krishna. It's great to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me. And I'm excited to be able to share my experience. I really hope it helps some people out there. My name is Kath Dawson. My role is Creative Director, and Strategy Internet Marketing is my company. We're a digital marketing agency based in Bristol in the UK, and basically we do creative content marketing, strategic and technical SEO, pay-per-click, social and digital PR. And when I saw that Google Plus Post Ads were going to become available, I completely jumped on it. I really wanted to play with it as soon as possible. And so as soon as it was out, I asked our pay-per-click team to set up some ads and see what happens. I got some budget and just kind of threw it out there. Basically, what Plus Post Ads are, for anybody who's not entirely sure, is that it's a Google Plus post. So just like you put any post on your Google Plus page or profile, you can take that post and use it as an advert in the display network. So the display network has been around for, I don't know how long, forever. It's very well established. There are over 2 million publishers on there. And it's basically the AdSense network, if you're more familiar with that. But the display network allows publishers to sign up with Google to say, I will display adverts. And Google matches the adverts with the content so that it's all relevant, and displays the adverts on the publisher's site. And when somebody interacts with that content or that advert, when they click on it, then the advertiser pays an amount of money and the publisher gets a small slice of that money, the rest of it going to Google. So everyone's a winner, really. But it's not like direct AdWords in search, so the intention is quite different. So it's a different kind of advertising. It's around the edges of people reading blogs and sites about their interests, news, whatever it might be. So the clicks tend to be cheaper because it's more kind of peripheral, subliminal type advertising. But the fact that you could put Plus Post ads in there was really exciting because it allows anybody who's engaging in Google Plus to get their content out to an audience, their audience that they want to reach, but a publisher has. So that the promotion possibilities for the content are just absolutely amazing. And kind of looking at this long term, you can see that Google Plus can stay advert free while still providing a platform to allow people to reach a brand new target audience, a massive audience right across the world. So really, really exciting. And as I say, we wanted to jump all over it and give it a try. In terms of what how it actually works, you set up your post ad. Sorry, you set up your Google Plus post, and then you go into the display network. So you have to have an AdWords account to start with, and you go in there and you set it up. You just it's the same kind of process as you would set up a display ad. You link it all together, and then you can see what options you have for different sizes of adverts. You can choose what sites you want to appear on, or you can set some parameters for types of sites you want to appear on. There's all sorts of possibilities. And then you put your credit card details in, and you press the button to turn it on. And then you wait to see what happens.
Before we go on and explore the different ads, perhaps we can just step back for a moment, because you said a couple of times that you were very excited. I know you are personally active on Google Plus, your organization is. What was it that got you so thrilled by this new opportunity? Because people may not understand why you had that perspective.
Sure, it's because the 2 million publishers. You know, the opportunity out there is huge. These publishers have your audience. They already have the eyeballs of the people that you want to reach. So it gives you access to their audience in a way that just wasn't there before, with content that is potentially much more engaging. So adverts, I mean, you can do banner ads, you can do text ads. So in that sense, it's not that different, but it's new, and it's quite exciting because Google are trying to find a way to get more engaging content into their display network. So things like Hangouts, YouTube videos, potentially shopping Hangouts, they're still in beta, and Hangouts on Air, I think they're still in beta at the moment, but they will be coming to Plus Post Ads. So there hasn't been a way to get that kind of content in under the eyeballs of this audience that's out there already, and this is a way that really kind of connects that together in an easy way. It's very exciting as well, because it's engaging content. So when these adverts show, they show in a new kind of way where you have to hover over the advert in order for a lightbox to pop up, so that your post is there on the publisher's site as a lightbox, and you can +1 it, you can reshare it, you can comment on it, as well as clicking on a link to go off to the website. So it's a new way to have your target audience engaging with your content, and that I think is really, really exciting.
I was really delighted to see that it was being launched, and in fact, if people follow my content, they would know that I cover case studies of organizations using Google Plus. And one of the recent case studies I wrote about was the case study for Cadbury's and Cadbury's Cream Egg for Easter 2014. And they had a really interesting approach, and it was integrated with their community, with Google Hangouts. But one of the things that they did was actually use the Plus Post ads to be able to extend their reach. So I'll put a link to that in the notes that accompany the show in case anybody wants to go and look at it. But I too was really excited about this new opportunity to take, as you said, engaging content through. So why don't we take a look at your considerations? I know there's a number of things that you want to share with us, like what your ads looked like, but perhaps we can start off with, well, how did you decide what would be relevant content? Because on your Google Plus business page, which is what I think you were running your ads from, there's a lot of content there. So how do you make a decision about what to test?
Well, it's a very good question, and actually this one was fairly easy because the ebook that we used for the Plus Post ad had been recently launched, and it got a lot of engagement through other channels. It was really well received, and I thought it made quite an attractive Plus Post. So I thought straight away, this is the one we'll use because it's a free book, it's free to download, it's packed with quality content, loads of really useful information. We've had some fantastic feedback on it. So I just used that. I didn't actually think beyond that. However, I would think beyond that now. From what I've learned, I would think very, very carefully about exactly what it is you're going to promote and how you're going to promote it. Because I think, and actually maybe if I can show you the way the adverts appear, it might help to understand that. So can I just...
That would be great. And I'm so fortunate to know you because you can tell us all the mistakes that you made, which I know you are going to share with us so we can avoid doing that. But of course, come to you to get some expert advice anyway.
Right, can you see my screen okay?
I can, absolutely. So we can see two different ads here. So one looks like a skyscraper ad and one looks like a square ad to us.
Yeah, there were three of them that we ran, and I'll show you the next one in a moment. But as you can see, this is how the ad would appear on a publisher's site. So dependent on what settings they had on their page to choose which option would fit best. But this is how your post would appear, or this is how our post appeared. And this actually is an image of a book, but you can't see that in this ad. It's not clear that it is an image of a book. It's as you said yourself earlier on when we were looking at this, there's a red image. You didn't say there's a book. So that was the first mistake that we made, was getting that image nice and clear, because it doesn't. It says it's a free content marketing ebook, but that's the only real trigger that tells you what it is.
So you could see a preview of this then, could you, Kath?
Well, yes, you could see a preview of how your ad would appear within Adwords, within the display network setup at the back end before it actually went up. I think I was just a bit too excited and ran ahead with it anyway. I didn't, as I say, I instructed the guys, the pay-per-click guys, to just set it up, and did it just before Easter, and didn't actually think about these issues. I was just a little bit too excited. But I can tell you now, it is an issue. You need to make sure that preview image is complete. Really, that it gets a message across.
Well, that's really perfect for us, given the fact that we're talking about the visual content marketing show, and for me, these ads are very visual, and it's the same learnings, isn't it, that you'd have whether you're on Facebook or LinkedIn or any platform, Twitter.
Yeah,
visual images make a difference. So it's a great reminder about what our visuals look like in the ads.
Yeah, absolutely. And the skyscraper, as you can see, really doesn't look very good at all. It's got Strategy Internet instead of the full company name. There's a little bit of text under free content marketing ebook, which is just kind of, it's not clear what that is. And then there's a big white gap underneath an incomplete image. So I probably wouldn't do that one again, or certainly not with this presentation. Although I will say that Mark Track-Pagan did a similar kind of test, and when he showed the images of his adverts, it actually had his image underneath, the image of his face, his profile image, underneath the book. So I can only presume that is because he was logged in, and maybe if he was looking at it on the content network, that actually, because he was logged in and the content was from Google+, it kind of showed that he had viewed it. Do you see where those three little dots are? There's something extra that appears there, I believe, if you're logged in and that people who viewed that content.
So basically, when we create the ad, we're not going to have any opportunity to change the title, because that looks like the first part of it is coming up from the name of your page or your profile. But obviously then the other piece is content that you've written, as in free content marketing ebook, that would have come up because you wrote that in the post.
Correct. And if this was done from a profile page, then that would be, instead of an image of a chess piece, it would be the person's profile picture and presumably the person's profile name instead of the brand name.
So one of the things we should just touch on is, for a moment, just thinking about what are some of the criteria, because you've just mentioned there about we can use pages and also profiles. So I know there's a specific criteria about the number of people who need to be following your business page on Google+, and of course we can have multiple pages, and equally our profile. Perhaps you can take us through that before we go on to the next ad.
You have to have 1,000 followers is basically the only criteria from Google in order to take part in this. They don't want to include anybody that's got less than 1,000 followers because, in their opinion, if you've got to 1,000 followers, you've probably got pretty good interaction with Google+, you've got good engagement, and I guess they don't want people just jumping on, creating a Google+ profile, having no engagement and throwing up content. And so by setting the bar at 1,000, which may or may not stay like that, then they're already setting the bar high on Google+ to say you have to have been around a while and engaged. And I think that's reasonable, actually, given my experience of this. I think people can lose a lot of money quickly, but equally Google can get a lot of inappropriate content, not done as best it can possibly be done. To get 1,000 followers, I think you have to care about your content and actually be delivering something of value.
Certainly my experience is that here in Ireland is that for many organisations, they're still finding it an early start in terms of using Google+. And even those who've been around for some time, it's around having that content plan that's consistent, and it's quite challenging to get to 1,000 followers. I don't have 1,000 followers on my company page. I do have more than that on my personal profile. So for me, I could therefore use my personal profile if I wish to do so to run these ads.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's look at your third ad now that you had a third style.
Yeah. That's a third style. That looks better than the skyscraper, I think, but it's still, you see, the image still suffers from the fact that it's incomplete, and it's not clear exactly what it is. But what is quite nice is it shows you the social proof, really. It shows you that the 17 plus ones, there's 14 reshares, and there's 1 comment. So that's potentially really nice for encouraging people to say, if they recognize it as a Google+ post ad, they can see that there's been engagement on there already. And I think if those numbers were higher, then that would encourage people more.
Have you found anything, Kath, in terms of the design that you could use that would work well if you were doing that ebook again, a design that might work across all 3? Because I think that's quite a challenge to find one image that looks great on all 3 and on your Google+ post.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually if I just pop back to the first one, it's the same dimensions across all 3. It's just that they're slightly different sizes, but they're the same dimensions of the image that was on the Google+ post is displayed there. So I think it's just making sure that those dimensions are adhered to, and your image, whatever you're trying to say, what message you're trying to get across, slots in there just perfectly.
And I think that's really interesting, because I know a lot of people have been moving towards larger images on Google+. So one thing that happened a little while back is that we can now see preview of content. So if you'd shared content from your website to Google+, then that would be coming up actually in that same dimension, that same size. Yeah. But many people have been updating much bigger images, almost Pinterest, kind of optimized images, which are longer than they are wider. And that's a great highlight, that we should think carefully about that style of image to be more consistent with what Google's looking for.
Yeah, well, as you'll see from the advert there's a hover to expand button. That's the call to action on the advert. And what happens with that is if you click on it, then you get a light box that comes up. And again, you can see this as a preview within AdWords. and you can see how your post would appear in that lightbox. So there you can see it's got opened up a little bit more text, and there is a scroll bar there, so you could scroll down. You can see now more clearly it is a book, even though you can't see the whole image. You can scroll down to see the whole of the rest of the book and the engagement underneath that, and you can engage directly there within that lightbox if you're logged into Google+. So you can +1, you can comment, you can reshare from there. If you're logged in. Now, if you're not logged in, it's going to kind of pop up and say you need to log into Google+. But I think that I was quite impressed with the open rate. You know, people were hovering to expand, and there's a 2-second delay there as well. So you have to hover over that hover to expand button for 2 seconds before it will open in a lightbox, and that's what triggers your charge. That's the cost. The cost is to open that lightbox.
So again, if I look at the construction of that ad, you know, if I've kind of looked at how it's been developed, you want to make sure you've got a really good headline. So your name or your company page will be the first thing that comes up. So you've got free content marketing ebook, which is a good headline, and then you go on to a little description, and then there's a link that you can have. Yeah. So you might want to think about how you play with those things if you're considering running this kind of an ad, about where that positioning of that link is as well. So again, much the same as if you're sharing something on Facebook and it goes out into the news feed where perhaps not everything is seen or the same in terms of on LinkedIn. So if you're familiar with doing those kind of ads, you know that you need to play carefully around having good call to action, good immediate introduction, and quickly get to that link, even if it went on for other content. And yeah. In fact, if for me, if it's going to show that image, we probably don't want to have too much description, do we, in terms of it in the post?
Well, no, and actually this was my learning between the first test and the second test I did, because I put it up for 2 days, and then I took it down, edited the post, and put it back up for another 2 days, because my first post, which was an original post on Google+, it wasn't written to be a Google+ post ad. It was one that existed and it had some engagement on it, which was why I wanted to use it. It actually had, I don't know, 3-4 paragraphs, short paragraphs, but 3 or 4 paragraphs on there. And so when you clicked on it, when you hovered over it and it opened in the lightbox, actually what you got here was different to what I'm showing you on the screen. It actually had, where it's got the link now, it had a little link to read more.
Yeah.
And that was that was schoolboy error. That was really, I should have spotted that to start with. And that's why we changed it, made the 3-line paragraph really kind of punchy, and then had click here to download the free ebook now with the shortener, so that the call to action on what I wanted people to do from this advert was immediately obvious.
You say it's a schoolboy error or a schoolgirl error. It doesn't matter. We're not being sexist here on this show. But I see it all the time. And even though we know it and we might be familiar, it's easy for us to extend it. So I think it's really good learning, and thank you for sharing that. And yes, we can apply it from other platforms that we might be using, but we don't always realize it until it goes live, do we?
Sure, absolutely. I wonder if I should come off this screen share now.
Yeah.
There we are.
So lots of great learnings there. And you said that you were really excited about the engagement. So what did you find, particularly as you moved to your second, to your second test then, Kath? What were the things that you noted when you made that change?
Well, actually, I noted that the click-through rate was very similar. It actually didn't have any impact on how many people hovered over, because actually they didn't see what was inside the lightbox until they'd hovered over it. So actually, the charges that we got, or the clicks that we got, were pretty much consistent across the 2 tests. Now the second test, I added in tracking, which of course I didn't do on the first test, because again I got a bit excited and thought I'll throw it up there, and I'm going to get loads and loads of +1s and reshares, and it's all going to be great, and I'm going to get comments, and I was my expectations were high, I have to say. And what we actually got was only 1 +1 across the whole test. For £200, we got 1 +1 on the post. And from the second test, which was around about half the cost, we got 13 click-throughs to the website. I don't know what we got from the first test, but I would imagine it was a lot less than that, because we didn't have that nice, easy call to action with the link that you could see easily. So I think I'm quite disappointed with the clicks through to the website, but there's a number of different reasons why this could have not worked so well. I mean, one of it is the placements, that actually we might not have picked the best placements for this. We don't actually run display network ads for ourselves on a regular basis, so we have no history to work it on. We had to go fairly broad, and actually you have to be prepared to lose some money doing this, because you need that learning. You need to find out where your actual audience is, and you can anticipate where you think it'll be, but you don't know until you actually run AdWords, until you engage in the display network. So you do need to have a bit of a thick skin there and persistence. So it could have been where they were displayed.
So before you go on, Kath,
yeah.
I mean, you mentioned the budget that you had. If you're a small to medium-sized organization, what do you think would be a good budget to be prepared to test, and also test perhaps a couple of different ads?
To be honest, I think you need probably at least £1,000 to get some good data. Ideally, several £1,000s, because the learning you'll get from that means that your costs will go down and your return will go up. But you have to have a budget to be prepared to lose with pay-per-click. Because the learning is just it's unique really for you. You don't get anybody else's history, you just get your own. And the better your content is, the more engaging it is, the better the sites are that you choose to display it on, the cheaper your cost will be, the higher your return will be. And that's why a pay-per-click and the display network is brilliant for the right content and the right audience, and making sure you get all your ducks in a row first. But to learn, I think you probably needed £1,000, £2,000. It depends on how many ads you want to run. You'll learn faster the more money you've got.
So let's talk about another thing that you might want to experiment with is content. So you gave us the examples of how you tweaked your content and how you might learn about the image and so on. But what about the type of content? Because one of the things that I was quite interested with is the fact that these plus post ads can also be used to potentially get more reach of your Google Hangouts, or your Google Hangouts that are going to be taking place. And that's one of the things that Google Plus explored. So what are your thoughts on the type of content that you think might work? And I know that's kind of a really broad question, given the fact there's so many different types of businesses, but do you have any thoughts around that, particularly if you guys are content marketing experts?
Sure. Well, certainly visual. It's got to be visual. If you don't have a strong image with a strong message, then I would say probably don't bother. I think our image was wrong, but I think our message was right. So there's things to be changed there. But I think that there's quite a lot of learning that's been done with the beta testing that's been done, and there's some examples of what's worked well there. So the advert that attracted me in was the Toyota Collaborator, and those results were actually simulated, because I checked it out and I went to see the original results of all these +1s, and they did have good +1s, but it wasn't quite as high as was in the advert. So I think they were showing you what is possible rather than what was actually achieved. And I think you have to think about who is your target audience, and what mindset are they going to be in when they're actually on the publications that they're reading. So say for instance it's a fashion blogger and you're reading a fashion blog, and your plus post ad is going to appear there. If it's a hangout, you might be wanting to launch a new range or have new trends or have something that is going to be really quite something almost exclusive and really interesting that they can get hold of there, rather than I don't know, buy our tops, or it's got to be something that's a little bit different and eye-catching.
And it's interesting because you pick the topic of fashion, and there's a number of fashion organisations who've been using Hangouts, and in fact one of the ones that happened in the last couple of weeks was New Look, and they've been running a series of events just as you describe. In fact, for them it's around how do you transition. Those of us who are in Europe will know this, how do you transition from the kind of wintry spring to a spring summer, and what your clothing might be for that. So that might be something to promote. But I really wonder if I would hang around watching a full replay of a Hangout. I don't think I would. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, again, it depends on the publication, and I think you need to learn from experimenting, because there isn't enough that's been done by kind of regular brands. There's been a lot of beta testing with big brands and some smaller brands too, but they've had their hand held by Google to test this all out. And I think you put this out in the wild, and you'll find people will have different experiences, and I'm excited to learn from those experiences. I want to see how creative people get. I know ASOS, while you mentioned fashion, I know ASOS have been using plus post ads to, I think, with a fashion show they were at recently, and they used the Hangouts and video in order to broadcast on fashion blogs what were their latest fashions coming out of this fashion show. Now that's really quite exciting. Also, I believe that if you have a Hangout and the Hangout has happened, then you'll be able to watch the replay of the Hangout on that publication with that advert. Again, will people do it? Will they watch short ones, long ones? I would have thought they'd watch shorter ones. But again, I think it depends on who the advertiser is as well. If it's a great big brand and you're really interested, then they're probably going to have more traction than smaller brands.
And also the content. I mean, in fact, you were mentioning fashion in terms of ASOS, another organisation who used Hangouts for a launch of their products was Topshop, and Topshop did an event earlier on this year. So I'm just trying to think about some European brands, as you are, in terms of using Hangouts, and they used one for their launch of their collection. And for me, it's just a good example of coming back to solid content marketing, which I know is something that you focus on and I focus on. So maybe that's the case for repurposing some of our content into smaller chunks, because even then, I don't think watching a 30-minute Hangout, which is what many of these brands have been doing, and in other arenas as well, not just in fashion, is actually, I'm not sure if I would stay on that site. I might click through then perhaps to go and then watch the full event or bookmark it, but then I really watch a lot of Hangouts, so I might not be the usual person.
I think
the other thing you mentioned is about the +1s, and I wonder if that's because people aren't necessarily always logged into Google, so they don't do that. Generally, I don't see +1s on content being as many as you still get your Twitter or your Facebook or your Pinterest shares. And the other thing is, in fact, I felt this, I was almost nervous about giving a +1. It's like, well, okay, Google's going to think I'm recommending that, and if anything, I would be more scarce with my use of +1s in the past, if I think about my early days on Google+, than I would with a share on Twitter or a share on Facebook. And I wonder if that's something that's in people's mind. Don't know, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I hadn't actually thought of that, but I think that's a really good point, because people might be thinking, if I +1 this, does that mean I'm going to see more adverts from these people? What's the extra message that this +1 is sending? I think there's a lot of curiosity about it, because these pop up as light boxes, and they're going to pop up to people who don't know what Google Plus is. They won't have Google Plus accounts. They might be irritated by the fact it's a pop up. So actually, although I was very excited to start with, I've kind of calmed down a bit. I do think that this is a very exciting way to advertise, but I think it's you just need to kind of take a step back and really think through the process, think through your content, recognize that this is actually the kind of highest level of the buying process. This is all about awareness. You know, these are not people who are looking for your brand. They're not people who are looking to buy from you. They're people who are reading other stuff. And they happen to be your target audience, ideally, but they're reading something else. So you need to provide them something of value and of interest, perhaps entertaining, perhaps just fun, some information, some latest news, whatever it is, something that's going to attract their attention and think, I'm interested in that, and they're going to click on it and know more about you, be more aware of your brand. So I think if people think of it as brand awareness and that first stage of the buying process, and think of what content do they have or could they create that will tick that box, then that's the key to success with this.
Actually, I'm just thinking about two other things which you may not have explored. But what does this look? What do these ads look like on mobile? Which I know Google will have thought about that. So do you still see that same approach on mobile devices? And the second question, I'll throw a second one in for you there, which is what about remarketing? Do we think we're going to be able to see remarketing with Plus Post ads?
To be honest, I don't know the answer to either of those questions. I assume that Google have tested all this through on mobile, and it does look acceptable on mobile, but I haven't seen it from the other end. I haven't actually seen anybody doing Plus Post ads on publications that I read. It's difficult to find it. You don't actually get the data about where your ads have been displayed unless you're kind of telling them in advance where you want them to be displayed. That information isn't available for kind of 24 hours. So, you know, and it's displayed all over the place. So it's really difficult to spot it from the other end and see what happens there. But I think if Google finds success with this process, then yes, I think they could roll this out in any number of different places. But they are looking to test and learn and keep kind of rolling things out gradually, which is why I think the Hangouts on Air aren't available yet, but the YouTube videos are. But they're coming soon.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to experiment, and it's just going to be another example of making sure you've got engagement on your content, which we know is tough to do. I think particularly I'm seeing that as in a European context, it is really challenging for UK, Irish, other European brands, I think, to get a lot of interaction on their Google Plus posts on their business pages.
Yeah, no, that's true. And again, it's experimenting. It's understanding the audience that you have and the people who are following you and what they react best to. And we're doing quite a lot of testing at the moment. And actually, I had a really good weekend doing some testing and getting some really good traction on some posts that I had a theory about. And they did really well. So, but will that translate into another piece of content quite so well? Probably not. There's different things to consider with every piece of content and every target audience you're going for. But awareness of the things you need to test and measure, and what you need to look for, I think is what's most important. And just don't give up. Learn, iterate, move ahead, get better all the time, and that's what works.
Yeah, and certainly a final thought from me on the content is what I'm not seeing working for the brands that I've looked at is where they've just taken the same content and they put one line on Google Plus, which is the equivalent of what they might have put on their Facebook post and their Twitter posts and their LinkedIn content or whatever else it might be. And I think, just as we all know, those of us who've been experimenting with content marketing and visual content marketing in particular, then it's about making sure you've got content that's relevant for that audience and spending a little bit of time. I think people on Google Plus appreciate a little bit extra consideration about the content that you share, rather than just saying, okay, this is a place where I want to place an image, share a link, and get you to come back and look at this content elsewhere. So yeah. I'm still seeing longer content and more thoughtful content and different content working for the brands that I've been looking at.
Yeah.
So any final thoughts from you, Kath, around getting started? Those people who've not yet experimented, you've given us some great ideas about the size of the budget. You've given us some really good tips around experiment and explore it and thinking about our visual content. Any other final nuggets that I can prize from you?
Well, I'd say just a couple of things. I'm checking down my list of things I wanted to kind of let people know is it's really easy. It's very easy to set up. It's very easy to lose a lot of money. So I would advise that you get help from somebody who knows what they're doing with the content network, and recognize when you've got enough information to pause something and make changes. You can use existing posts, and you can edit those posts and reuse those as adverts, but each time you do, you have to get your advert reviewed and approved, and that can take 24 hours, or longer if it's Easter, but 24 hours to get your advert approved. And low quality content is not going to work. Don't just chuck up anything and think, oh well, this isn't working if you don't get the clicks or the return that you want. Think very carefully about the content that you're putting up and what you're trying to achieve, so you can measure whether it's successful or not. And use tracking. Track every aspect of what you're trying to do, so that you can see what works and what doesn't. But I would say give it a go. If you have the budget, if you have the right content, and if there's a target audience out there on the display network, then I think massive things can be achieved here. And you can reach eyeballs who want to reach you. So I would definitely encourage anybody who's got a bit of a thick skin, a bit of a budget, an AdWords account, and over 1,000 followers on your profile or your brand to have a go, and learn and improve and hopefully have a good experience, and then come back and tell us how you got on, because we'd love to know.
Really great advice, and some of you may already have a lot of experience on using the ad network already, which could give you some insights about what to do. So Kath, just wanted to remind everybody how to get in contact with you. So on Twitter, I know you're easy to find at Kath Dawson. You're very visible on Google+. But what about telling us about how people can contact you and your team if they're looking for assistance about their content marketing, if they're in the UK particularly, and also in terms of the team of people that you've got working with you on pay-per-click and other aspects? How can people get in contact with you to support them with their content marketing?
Absolutely. Well, you can contact us on our website, strategyinternetmarketing.co.uk, or through me, as you've said, Kath Dawson on Twitter. I'm also Kath Dawson on Google+, and we have a very active Google+ page under Strategy Internet Marketing. So hopefully we're quite easy to find, and if you have any questions at all, either on social media or contact us on the phone, that would be super. We'd love to speak to anybody who's interested in getting more quality content on their site to grow their brand and their audience.
And a final thought from me about your organisation, two things in fact. Kath also hosts a Google Hangout where she's encouraging people in the UK to get involved. The last event was called the Great British Hangout. I think that's a fantastic name. They just need the cakes to go along with it, as per the Mary Berry show, I think, isn't it? And Paul Hollywood, who did that in the UK, the Great British Bake Off. So do watch out for Kath's Hangouts. The other thing I want to mention to you is, like myself, she tracks what organizations are doing on Google+. So you'll find a lot of my content over, particularly on my personal blog at krishna.me. And I've been writing case studies there, or over on my business page or my profile here on Google+. But Kath has also put together a Google+ circle. So if you're on Google+, you'll understand what that is. If you're not, come and ask us and we'll explain. But before we finish up, Kath, why don't you tell people what you're trying to do with that Google+ circle, specifically around British brands?
Yeah, well, it's an idea that kind of myself and Peter Lunn, big shout out to Peter Lunn, who's my partner in crime on this, on the Great British Hangout, is that we're trying to encourage more British brands to get involved in Google+. You know, the big names are all American, and they're fantastic, and they're so supportive, it's ridiculous. They're the reason that I'm back on Google+ and having a fantastic time. But I think there's a lot of British brands that kind of come along and find there's not a lot happening, and they go away again, and they just need a little bit more support to kind of find each other, really. So the circle is about finding active British brands and adding them all into a circle, and keep adding to the circle and creating more circles, because there's no limit to how much we can do this, but just help them connect with each other. Communities are a great way to do that, and there's a UK Connect community, which is fantastic. I found that yesterday completely by accident, and there's loads of active British brands on there. So if you want to be added to the circle and you're a British brand, just let me know at Kath Dawson on Google Plus, and I'll be more than happy to add you in.
That's great. And as Kath said, we want to make sure that you come back and let us know about how things have been going for you. So just as we actually finish up today's show, I want to remind you, in terms of anybody who actually comes onto this whole program of actually being on Google Plus, and particularly if you've listened to today's show, I really want to encourage you to explore what we've talked about today. What could you adopt from the ideas we've covered? What could you adapt in terms of applying to your organization? And then, really come back, and we'd love to know about your success stories. That's the one thing I really like to hear about, is what have people tried? And we'd love to host you. I mean, maybe you want to be on one of Kath's Hangouts. I'd love to have you on one of mine if you've got further thoughts on the use of Plus Post ads, what you've learned and experiment with. And I really appreciated that Kath has been here with us today. So don't forget to reach out to her organization, if you're looking for support. But just in terms of keeping in contact with future shows, you can go over to visualcontentmarketingshow.com, put in the details there. You'll be able to easily access from there the historical public hangouts that I've done that have been publicly available. There are other webinars and things that we've been doing on visual content marketing, which you can also find out about from my posts that I make on Google Plus and just about everywhere else that you can find me. But put your details into Visual Content Marketing Show, and you can then subscribe for updates of forthcoming episodes. But for today, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you particularly to Kath for sharing with us your experience of using Google Plus posts. And do let us know, everybody, about what your experience is of using this new opportunity to reach an extended audience, to build more visibility around your organization through great visual content marketing. Thanks, everybody. Until next time.